November 1942. North Africa. The Western Desert. The dust from the retreating British column had barely settled when Obergefreiter Hans Müller spotted it, an olive-drab vehicle abandoned near a disabled tank, its tires half buried in sand. His squad approached cautiously, weapons ready. American markings. The white star on the hood was unmistakable. Paint faded by desert sun and abraded by sand. Amerikanischer Jeep, someone muttered. Müller had heard of these vehicles but never seen one up close. The entire German army knew about American industrial capacity, but propaganda couldn't hide it forever. But seeing the evidence firsthand was different. This wasn't some propaganda photograph or intelligence report. This was real American steel, sitting abandoned in the Libyan desert. Feldwebel Otto Becker, the platoon's senior mechanic, walked around the vehicle slowly, studying it with professional interest. 20 years of working with engines had taught him to evaluate machinery at a glance. The Jeep was damaged, bullet holes stitched across the hood. One tire flat, but structurally intact. "Get it running," the lieutenant ordered. If the Americans left it, they couldn't fix it. Let's see if German mechanics are better. Becker smiled slightly. That sounded like a challenge he could accept. The squad manhandled the Jeep onto firmer ground, replaced the damaged tire with their own vehicle's spare. It fit surprisingly, and Becker opened the hood. What he saw made him pause. Feldwebel Otto Becker, recalling that moment years later. I expected typical American excess, something unnecessarily large and complicated. Instead, I found an engine that was simple, accessible, and logically arranged. Everything a mechanic needs to reach was within reach. The design was practical, not wasteful. That surprised me more than anything. The motor was larger than their Volkswagen Kübelwagens, significantly larger. Becker estimated at least double the displacement. The cooling system used water rather than air, which meant a vulnerable radiator, but also meant consistent cooling under sustained load. He checked the oil low but serviceable. Fuel. The tank still held perhaps 5 liters. Battery connections, corroded but intact. "Try starting it," Becker said. Müller climbed into the driver's seat, found the key still in the ignition. Americans were careless, and turned it. The starter motor cranked. Once, twice. On the third attempt, the engine caught, coughed, and roared to life. The sound was deeper than their Kübelwagen's distinctive air-cooled chatter. This was a water-cooled inline 4-cylinder, robust and powerful. Black smoke belched from the exhaust, then cleared as the engine found its rhythm. The soldiers looked at each other. The vehicle, abandoned as unfixable, had just started on the third attempt. "Americans," someone said, shaking his head. "They give up too easily." But Becker wasn't so sure. Maybe the Americans hadn't given up. Maybe they'd simply had so many vehicles that losing one didn't matter. That thought was more disturbing than any propaganda about American weakness. An army that could afford to abandon functional vehicles was an army with resources Germany couldn't match. The lieutenant climbed into the passenger seat. "Drive it back to headquarters. I want a full evaluation. Compare it to our Kübelwagen. Report everything. Strength, weaknesses, what we can learn." As Müller engaged the clutch and the Jeep lurched forward, Becker rode in the back, already mentally cataloging what he'd need to examine. The vehicle moved with surprising ease across the sand, its wide tires distributing weight effectively. Power was immediate and abundant, none of the struggling their Kübelwagen experienced in loose terrain. By the time they reached the German field headquarters 3 kilometers distant, Becker had formed a preliminary assessment. This American vehicle was dangerous. Not because it carried weapons any vehicle could mount a machine gun. It was dangerous because it was good. Really good. And if the Americans were producing these by the thousands while Germany struggled to build 50,000 Kübelwagen total, that disparity mattered more than tactical victories or strategic brilliance. Wars were won with logistics and production. Becker had learned that in the Great War, this little American truck suggested the coming war would be decided by factories, not just soldiers. "Get it under cover," the lieutenant ordered when they arrived. "I want a complete technical examination. Disassemble what you need to. Photograph everything. Write detailed reports." Becker nodded. He'd been given permission to satisfy his professional curiosity about this enemy machine. What he would discover over the following days would change his understanding of American industrial warfare forever. To understand what Becker and his mechanics were evaluating, one must understand both vehicles' origins, how they were conceived, designed, and built under vastly different circumstances. The American story began in June 1940, with war already consuming Europe. The United States Army recognized that its light vehicle fleet was obsolete. A hodgepodge of motorcycles, sidecars, and aging Ford Model T trucks that could barely manage paved roads, much less combat conditions. On July 11, 1940, the Quartermaster Corps sent bid invitations to 135 American automotive manufacturers. The specifications were demanding: a quarter-ton four-wheel drive vehicle, lightweight, capable of carrying personnel or cargo, suitable for reconnaissance or command duty. The timeline was insane. Prototype plans due in 11 days. First prototype delivered in 49 days. 70 test vehicles completed within 75 days. Most manufacturers ignored the request. It was impossible. Only 3 companies responded: American Bantam Car Company of Butler, Pennsylvania, Willys Overland of Toledo, Ohio, and Ford Motor Company. American Bantam was tiny, on the edge of bankruptcy, but desperate for contracts. They delivered comprehensive prototype plans by the deadline. The Army awarded them a contract for 70 test vehicles, but worried that such a small company couldn't meet wartime production demands. So the Army did something pragmatic and arguably unfair. They invited Willys and Ford to observe Bantam's testing, examine the vehicle, and receive copies of the blueprints. Both companies then designed their own vehicles incorporating Bantam's innovations. Willys built the Quad, named for its four-wheel drive system. Ford created the Pygmy. All 3 vehicles underwent brutal testing through 1940 and into 1941. The Army identified the best features of each design and demanded they be combined into a standardized vehicle. Bantam's four-wheel transmission and Spicer differential, Willys's Go Devil engine, a 4-cylinder flathead displacing 134 cubic inches, producing 60 horsepower at 4,000 RPM, Ford's stamped steel grille and refined bodywork. The result was the Willys MB, military, B model. In July 1941, Willys received a contract for 16,000 vehicles at $738.74 each. By October 1941, it became clear Willys alone couldn't meet production demands. Ford was contracted to build identical vehicles under license, designated GPW, G for government contract, P for 80-inch wheelbase, W for Willys design. Production ramped up with American industrial efficiency. At peak production, a Jeep rolled off assembly lines every 2 minutes. By war's end, Willys produced 363,000 vehicles. Ford built 277,000. Total production 640,000 Jeeps. The German story was different. In January 1938, Wehrmacht officials approached Ferdinand Porsche about designing a military vehicle based on his Volkswagen People's Car design. The requirements emphasized lightness and economy. Germany lacked America's petroleum reserves and couldn't afford fuel-thirsty vehicles. Porsche adapted the Volkswagen Beetle platform, removing the enclosed body and replacing it with a simple bucket seat configuration. The result was the Kübelwagen, literally bucket seat car, Type 82 in Volkswagen's designation system. The vehicle used the Beetle's rear-mounted air-cooled engine, initially displacing 985 cubic centimeters and producing just 22 horsepower. Later versions received an upgraded engine of 1,131 cubic centimeters, producing 25 horsepower. Still barely a third of the Jeep's output. But the Kübelwagen had advantages. It weighed just 1,450 pounds, over 800 pounds lighter than the Jeep's 2,326 pounds. The air-cooled engine required no radiator, eliminating a vulnerable component. The smooth, flat underbody allowed the vehicle to slide over soft terrain like a sled when wheels lost traction. Most remarkably, Porsche incorporated a limited-slip differential, the first automotive application of technology previously seen only in 1930s Audi Grand Prix race cars. This allowed effective off-road performance, despite having only rear-wheel drive. The Wehrmacht initially resisted the Kübelwagen. Officers wanted a traditional four-wheel drive vehicle, but Hitler himself intervened, forcing adoption of Porsche's design. Testing proved the skeptics wrong. The Kübelwagen performed remarkably well, often outperforming heavier four-wheel drive vehicles in certain conditions. Production began in 1940 at Volkswagen's factory in Stadtdisk KDF Wagens, City of the Strength Through Joy car, later renamed Wolfsburg. Bodies were built by Ambi Bud Presswork in Berlin, but production was limited. Germany's industrial capacity, already strained by producing tanks, aircraft, and weapons, couldn't match American automotive output. By war's end, approximately 50,435 Kübelwagen had been built. Compared to the Jeep's 640,000, the disparity was stark. Now, in a desert workshop, Feldwebel Becker would compare these two philosophies directly: American power and versatility versus German efficiency and ingenuity. The vehicle sitting before him represented everything Germany wasn't: wealthy, resource-abundant, capable of building excess capacity into every design. His own Kübelwagen, parked alongside for comparison, represented German reality, making the most of limited resources through clever engineering. Both vehicles were excellent in their own ways, but only one nation could afford to produce them in war-winning quantities. That disparity, Becker was beginning to understand, might matter more than who had the better individual design. The morning after the capture, Becker assembled his best mechanics in the workshop tent. 3 men: Gefreiter Klaus Schmidt, who'd worked in his father's automotive shop before conscription; Obergefreiter Paul Wagner, a former Mercedes-Benz apprentice; and Soldat Ernst Hoffmann, young but mechanically gifted. "Gentlemen," Becker began, "we have an opportunity. Study this American vehicle. Compare it to our Kübelwagen. The Lieutenant wants a complete technical evaluation. What works better? What doesn't? What can we learn?" He gestured to both vehicles. "Approach this professionally, not ideologically. I don't care about propaganda. I care about facts. Understood?" The men nodded. Propaganda was for civilians and officers. Mechanics dealt in reality. Schmidt opened the Jeep's hood while Wagner examined the chassis. Hoffmann crawled underneath with a flashlight. "The engine," Schmidt called out, "is massive compared to ours." He measured quickly, with a ruler. "Approximately 130 cubic inches. Maybe 134. Our VW is 60 cubic inches. They have more than double our displacement." Becker wrote this down. Horsepower estimate. Based on displacement and design, 50 to 60 horsepower. Maybe more. Our Kübelwagen has 22. Correct, Feldwebel. The implications were obvious. Nearly triple the power meant triple the capability for towing, climbing, carrying loads. Wagner emerged from beneath the chassis. 4-wheel drive system. Full-time rear drive, engageable front axle through a transfer case. They can switch between 2-wheel and 4-wheel drive as needed. Our Kübelwagen, rear wheel only, Feldwebel. The limited slip differential helps, but we don't have powered front wheels. Another significant advantage for the Americans, Hoffmann called out from underneath. The frame is separate from the body bolts onto frame. Simple construction, easy to repair or modify. Not like our Kübelwagen, where the body provides structural support. Becker made more notes. Different design philosophy. The Jeep's approach was heavier but more versatile. Bodies could be swapped, modifications made easily. Electrical system, Becker asked. Schmidt traced the wiring. 12 volt. Our Kübelwagen is 6 volt. More powerful starter, brighter lights, better performance. Cooling. Water-cooled. Radiator here at the front. Schmidt tapped it. Vulnerable to bullets, but provides consistent cooling even under sustained load. Better than our air cooling for heavy work, worse for survivability. The evaluation continued for hours. Every system was examined, measured, compared. Suspension. The Jeep used leaf springs front and rear. Simple, robust, easy to repair. The Kübelwagen used torsion bars. More sophisticated, lighter, but harder to field repair. Tires. The Jeep rolled on 6.00 by 16-inch tires, large, providing good flotation in soft terrain. The Kübelwagen's tires were smaller. Transmission. 3 forward gears plus reverse, with a separate transfer case for 4-wheel drive engagement. The Kübelwagen had 4 forward gears but only rear-wheel drive. Fuel capacity. The Jeep carried approximately 15 gallons. The Kübelwagen held about 10.5 gallons. But the Jeep's consumption was much higher. By afternoon, Becker decided they needed to drive it. Schmidt, you have the most driving experience. Take it around the perimeter. Gentle at first. I want to know how it handles, how it accelerates, how it brakes. Compare everything to our Kübelwagen. Schmidt climbed into the driver's seat. The layout was familiar enough, steering wheel, pedals, gear shift, but the shift pattern was different, and there was an additional lever for the transfer case. He started the engine. That deep, powerful sound again. Engaging first gear, he released the clutch. The Jeep moved forward smoothly, power immediate and abundant. He accelerated through the gears. The engine pulled strongly, at any RPM. No struggling, no hunting for power. When he pressed the accelerator, the vehicle simply went. Gefrader Klaus Schmidt, testing the Jeep. The power was astonishing. In our Kübelwagen, you coax acceleration from the small engine. In the Jeep, you restrain it. Everything was immediate. Throttle response, acceleration, pulling power. It felt brutal compared to our vehicle's delicacy, but brutal in a way that was effective. Steering was heavier than the Kübelwagen's. The Jeep's higher center of gravity made it feel less stable in turns. But in straight-line acceleration and climbing ability, nothing their Kübelwagen could do compared. Schmidt drove it through soft sand, deliberately choosing terrain where their Kübelwagen struggled. The Jeep powered through without hesitation. Four-wheel drive, wide tires, and abundant torque simply overwhelmed obstacles. He engaged the four-wheel drive system using the transfer case lever. The front wheels pulled, and suddenly even steep inclines became manageable. When he returned, Becker saw the expression on Schmidt's face. Well, Feldwebel, it's very good. The power makes everything easier. Four-wheel drive means you can go places we would struggle. But Schmidt paused. It's also heavier, uses more fuel, and feels less nimble. But overall? Schmidt hesitated, then answered honestly. Overall, for a military vehicle that needs to do everything, it's superior to our Kübelwagen. That was the assessment Becker had been forming himself. The Kübelwagen was an excellent vehicle, clever, efficient, capable, but the Jeep was built for a different kind of war. A war where fuel was abundant, where versatility mattered more than efficiency, where carrying a heavy machine gun or towing an anti-tank weapon was standard practice. The Americans had designed a vehicle for total war. Germany had designed a vehicle for a resource-constrained military. Both succeeded at their goals. But only one goal matched the reality of modern industrial warfare. Obergefreiter Paul Wagner summed it up. We built the best vehicle we could with what we had. They built the best vehicle they could imagine and then produced it by the hundreds of thousands. That's the difference. Not design philosophy. Production capacity. Becker wrote his preliminary report that evening. His conclusion was simple and damning. The American Jeep represents a vehicle we could not build and could not afford to operate even if we could build it. It is superior in power, versatility, and ruggedness. Our Kübelwagen remains adequate for our purposes, but only because our purposes are constrained by fuel availability and production limitations. In a war of unlimited resources, we would want the American vehicle. He submitted the report knowing it would be read by officers who wouldn't want to hear it. But facts were facts. The Americans had a better tool for this kind of war, and they had 640,000 of them. 3 days after the initial examination, Becker received permission to conduct comprehensive field testing. The same lieutenant who'd ordered the evaluation was curious enough to attend personally. I want to see this American vehicle in action, he said. Compare it directly to our Kübelwagen. Same terrain, same conditions, both vehicles. They selected varied terrain within the German defensive perimeter, steep slopes, soft sand, rocky ground, and a shallow wadi with standing water. Schmidt would drive the Jeep. Wagner would drive their Kübelwagen. Hoffman would ride with each, timing performance and noting observations. Test 1. Steep sandy slope. The slope rose at approximately 35 degrees, loose sand making traction difficult. Wagner attempted it first in the Kübelwagen. He backed up to get momentum, then charged the slope. The lightweight vehicle climbed quickly, but halfway up, the rear wheels began spinning despite the limited slip differential. Wagner feathered the throttle, trying to maintain momentum without breaking traction completely. The Kübelwagen clawed its way to the top, but barely. 23 seconds. Schmidt approached the same slope in the Jeep. He engaged four-wheel drive, selected first gear in low range, and simply drove up. No run-up, no drama. All four wheels pulled, and the abundant torque kept them moving. 16 seconds to the top. Four-wheel drive makes that look easy, the lieutenant observed. Test 2, deep sand. A patch of powdery sand, ankle deep, stretched 50 meters. The Kübelwagen approached cautiously. Wagner maintained speed, trying to float across the surface. The rear wheels dug in slightly, but the vehicle's lightweight and wide rear tires kept it moving. The smooth underbody helped when the wheels did sink. The chassis slid like a sled. It was slow, but the Kübelwagen made it through. The Jeep simply powered across. Weight and four-wheel drive combined to plow through the sand rather than float over it. Both vehicles succeeded, but using completely different approaches. Gefreiter Klaus Schmidt. The Kübelwagen danced across soft terrain like a ballerina. Light, nimble, using cleverness to overcome obstacles. The Jeep was a heavyweight boxer. It didn't avoid the obstacle, it smashed through it with brute force. Both worked. Different philosophies. Same result. Test 3. The Wadi. A shallow stream crossed their testing area. Water perhaps 18 inches deep with a firm gravel bottom. The Kübelwagen approached slowly. The air-cooled engine meant no worry about flooding the radiator, but the electrical system could short if submerged. Wagner drove through carefully. Water came up to the floorboards, but the vehicle kept running. Across successfully. The Jeep was equipped with a deep water fording kit. The previous crew had installed it. Extensions on the exhaust and air intake, sealed electrical connections, waterproofed ignition. Schmidt drove in confidently. Water rose to the bottom of the hood. The Jeep never hesitated. Engine running smoothly. It can ford up to waist-deep water with that equipment, Becker noted. Our Kübelwagen has limits. Test 4. Tight maneuvers. Through a course of barrels set 20 meters apart, requiring sharp turns. Wagner drove the Kübelwagen through quickly. The lightweight and short turning radius made it agile. 12 seconds. Schmidt navigated the Jeep through more carefully. The 80-inch wheelbase and higher center of gravity made it feel less stable in sharp turns. 17 seconds. The Kübelwagen is more nimble, the lieutenant observed. Better for reconnaissance where quick maneuvering matters. True, Becker agreed. But watch this. Test 5. Towing. They hitched a disabled Kübelwagen to each vehicle. The Kübelwagen towing another Kübelwagen, total weight approximately 2,900 pounds. Wagner engaged first gear and tried to move. The engine struggled. The clutch slipped. Eventually, with careful throttle work, he got the load moving, but speed was limited to walking pace. The Jeep towing the same Kübelwagen barely noticed the load. Schmidt accelerated normally, the larger engine and lower gearing making easy work of the tow. We have a 3.7 centimeter pack, the lieutenant said, referring to their 37 millimeter anti-tank gun. Could the Jeep tow it?
Easily, Becker replied. Americans reportedly use Jeeps to tow 105 millimeter howitzers in emergencies. Our Kübelwagen is limited to very light loads.
Test 6. Top speed. On a straight section of hard-packed desert track, both vehicles ran flat out. The Kübelwagen reached 80 kilometers per hour, 50 miles per hour with its engine screaming. The Jeep topped out at 72 kilometers per hour, 45 miles per hour, but did so with the engine nowhere near its limit. The governor's restricted speed, the engine had more to give. On roads, our vehicle is faster, Wagner noted. But the Jeep could carry a heavier load at that speed or maintain it longer without stress. After 4 hours of testing, both vehicles returned to the workshop. The lieutenant lit a cigarette and studied his notes. Summary. Feldwebel. Becker chose his words carefully. The Kübelwagen is lighter, more maneuverable, faster on roads, and significantly more fuel efficient. For reconnaissance and liaison in terrain with adequate roads, It is excellent. And the Jeep? The Jeep is more powerful, more versatile, can ford deeper water, tow heavier loads, climb steeper grades, and operate with less driver skill required. Four-wheel drive compensates for many mistakes. For general military use, especially when vehicles must perform multiple roles, it is superior. Which would you rather have in combat? That was the critical question. Becker looked at both vehicles. In our situation with our fuel supplies and our doctrine, the Kübelwagen is adequate and appropriate. But if I had unlimited fuel and could choose either vehicle for any mission, I would choose the Jeep. The lieutenant nodded slowly. Write that in your report. Exactly that. Berlin needs to understand what we're facing. This isn't propaganda anymore. This is reality, Obergefreiter Paul Wagner added. The Jeep isn't just a vehicle, it's a statement. It says we have so much industrial capacity that we can afford to put 60 horsepower and four-wheel drive in a quarter-ton truck. We cannot make that statement. That should terrify for more than any tactical report. The lieutenant didn't disagree. Over the following week, as Becker's team continued examining the Jeep, they discovered details that impressed them more than the raw performance. It was the versatility, the standardized adaptability that truly set the American design apart. Schmidt found the machine gun mount first. Feldwebel, look at this. A reinforced pedestal mount was welded to the floor between the front and rear seats. Standard equipment, apparently. Every Jeep came with the mounting hardware for a Browning M19 1930 caliber machine gun. Our Kübelwagen can mount an MG34, Wagner noted, but only with modification. Special brackets must be installed. This vehicle comes prepared from the factory. Hoffman discovered the radio mount next. Behind the passenger seat, a standardized rack with electrical connections already installed. Every American Jeep can carry a radio, Becker realized. Not a special variant, every single one. In the German military, radio-equipped Kübelwagen were separate subtypes, produced in limited numbers. Most Kübelwagen lacked radio capability entirely. The Americans had simply standardized it. Every vehicle could communicate. The implications for coordination and command were staggering. They found stretcher brackets next folding mounts that could convert the Jeep into a field ambulance in minutes. Again, standard equipment. The Kübelwagen had ambulance variants, but they required different bodies, built separately. The Jeep just added brackets. Bracket after bracket, mount after mount for jerry cans, spare tires, additional fuel cans, toolkits, ammunition boxes. Everything had a standardized attachment point. It's a platform, Becker finally said. Not a specialized vehicle, but a platform that adapts to whatever role is needed. Wagner found the technical manual stuffed in a waterproof pouch under the driver's seat. TM 9803 U.S. Army Technical Manual for Truck, Quarter-Ton 4x4. Even damaged and partially illegible from water exposure, the manual was comprehensive. Exploded diagrams showed every component. Maintenance schedules were clearly outlined. Parts were numbered and cataloged. This is production thinking, Becker observed. They designed this vehicle to be maintained by conscripts who'd never seen an engine before. Everything is accessible. Everything is explained. Nothing requires specialized knowledge. The Kübelwagen's manual was thorough, but assumed mechanical familiarity. The Jeep's manual assumed the user might be an 18-year-old farm boy who'd barely driven a tractor. American industrial democracy applied to military equipment. Feldwebel Otto Becker wrote in his detailed report, "The American Jeep succeeds not through any single superior feature, but through comprehensive standardization of versatility. Our Kübelwagen requires variants for different roles: ambulance, radio vehicle, command car, weapons carrier. The American vehicle performs all these roles with simple additions of standardized equipment. This represents industrial thinking at a level Germany has not achieved." The fuel consumption remained the Jeep's great weakness from the German perspective. At full load, hard driving, the Jeep consumed approximately 6 liters per 100 kilometers, 15 miles per gallon in American measurements. The Kübelwagen managed 10 liters per 100 kilometers, about 28 miles per gallon. For the fuel-starved Wehrmacht, this difference was critical. Obergefreiter Paul Wagner noted, "The Americans can afford to feed this machine. We cannot. That alone makes it unsuitable for our use, regardless of its capabilities. A superior vehicle you cannot fuel is worthless. But the production numbers haunted them. 640,000 Jeeps built by war's end, 50,435 Kübelwagen, a ratio of nearly 13 to 1. Even accounting for fuel consumption, the Americans could field more vehicles, more capability, more versatility. The mathematics of industrial war were inescapable. One afternoon, the lieutenant returned with an intelligence report. Americans are building one Jeep every 2 minutes at peak production, he read aloud. Total production capacity exceeds 30,000 vehicles monthly. Lend-Lease deliveries to Soviet Union and British Commonwealth forces are in addition to American military allocation. He put the report down. Gentlemen, we are not losing this war because of tactical inferiority or soldier quality. We are losing because they can build machines faster than we can destroy them. No one disagreed. The Jeep sitting in their workshop was evidence of that reality. Not because it was perfect. It wasn't. Not because it was unbeatable. It could be destroyed like any vehicle. But because there were 640,000 more where it came from, and Germany had no counter to that industrial avalanche. Becker completed his section on versatility with a simple statement. The American military has standardized adaptability. We have specialized our vehicles for specific roles. Their approach is more expensive per vehicle, but more efficient across an entire army. When resources permit building excess capacity into every design, versatility becomes affordable. Germany lacks those resources. We built the best vehicle our situation allowed. They built the best vehicle their imagination conceived. The difference is not engineering. It is industrial capacity. The lieutenant read the report and said nothing for a long moment. Finally, submit it through channels. Let Berlin read it. They won't like it. But someone needs to tell them the truth. While Becker evaluated a captured Jeep in North Africa, American engineers were conducting their own evaluation of captured German equipment. In November 1943, a Kübelwagen captured in Tunisia arrived at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. The U.S. Army Ordnance Department wanted to understand what German forces were using, how it compared to American equipment, and whether captured vehicles could be maintained and used by American forces in the field. The evaluation was thorough and professional. American engineers approached the Kübelwagen without preconceptions, testing it against the same standards applied to their own vehicles. The result was War Department Technical Manual TME 9803, published June 6, 1944, D-Day. The coincidental publication date was noted by historians but likely unplanned. The manual's designation was identical to the Jeep's own technical manual, with the prefix E for enemy. It provided complete maintenance and operational information for American soldiers who might encounter abandoned or captured Kübelwagen in Europe. The manual's introduction described the Type 82 as a four-wheeled, rubber-tired, rear-axle drive personnel carrier and reconnaissance car, comparable in purpose and size to the American quarter-ton truck. The comparison was inevitable. American testers put the Kübelwagen through the same trials they would apply to any military vehicle: acceleration, climbing ability, fuel consumption, reliability, maintainability. The results were documented with typical American technical precision. Performance: maximum speed, approximately 80 kilometers per hour on level roads, faster than the Jeep 72. Acceleration adequate but not impressive. Climbing ability good on hard surfaces, limited in loose terrain due to rear-wheel drive only. Fuel consumption: excellent. Approximately 10 liters per 100 kilometers, nearly double the Jeep's efficiency. Reliability: the air-cooled engine proved dependable across temperature extremes. No radiator meant one less component to fail or be damaged. Simple mechanical design meant fewer breakdown points. Maintainability: parts were accessible. Design was logical. But replacement parts would be impossible to source in American supply chains. The manual's most quoted section appeared in the technical assessment. The Volkswagen, the German equivalent of the American Jeep, is inferior in every way except in the comfort of its seating accommodations. That statement would be repeated in American military documents and later historical accounts, but the full evaluation was more nuanced. American engineers noted several features with approval. The limited slip differential was described as an effective solution to the traction problem in a rear-wheel drive vehicle. The smooth underbody was noted as providing unexpected performance in loose terrain through sledding action. The lightweight was acknowledged as advantageous for fuel economy in some tactical situations. But the conclusions were unequivocal. The Jeep was superior for American military needs. More power meant greater versatility. Four-wheel drive meant better all-terrain performance. Standardized radio mounts, weapon mounts, and modular equipment meant adaptability. Higher towing capacity meant supporting heavier weapons. A parallel British evaluation conducted by Humber Car Company engineers was even more dismissive. Their report, examining a Kübelwagen captured in North Africa, stated it exhibited no special brilliance in design except in details and that it is not to be regarded as an example of first-class modern design to be copied by British industry. The British were not impressed. But practical reality in the field told a different story. American soldiers who captured Kübelwagen often kept them for personal use. They were fun to drive, nimble, quick, economical, for running errands around base areas, moving between positions, or quick reconnaissance where heavy equipment wasn't needed. Captured Kübelwagen were popular. Private First Class James Morrison, 79th Infantry Division, used a captured Kübelwagen in France. We called it the Krautmobile. It was light, zippy, and used hardly any gas. For getting around quickly, it was actually better than our Jeep. Wouldn't want it for serious work. No four-wheel drive. Couldn't tow anything heavy. But for driving to chow or ferrying messages, it was perfect. Some guys brought home good memories of VWs. That's partly why the Beetle became popular in America after the war. That observation proved prophetic. In the 1950s, Volkswagen Beetles began appearing in American driveways. Veterans who'd driven captured Kübelwagen remembered the vehicles as reliable, economical, and well-engineered despite their enemy origins. The Kübelwagen's reputation helped the Beetle establish a foothold in the American market. German engineering, once encountered in war, was respected enough to succeed in peace. The Aberdeen Report, despite its dismissive summary, contributed to this grudging respect. American engineers had tested the Kübelwagen thoroughly enough to understand its merits even while concluding their own vehicle was superior. That professional assessment, stripping away propaganda and national pride, revealed both vehicles as products of their circumstances. The Jeep was built for a resource-abundant military that valued versatility over efficiency. The Kübelwagen was built for a resource-constrained military that valued efficiency over versatility. Both succeeded at their design goals. But only one nation's goals matched the reality of total industrial warfare. Sergeant Technical Grade Howard Phillips, Aberdeen Proving Ground test driver. The German vehicle was impressive for what it was. A lightweight, economical design that worked well within its limitations. But it had limitations. Ours didn't. We could do more, carry more, tow more, go more places. That's not because we were better engineers. It's because we could afford to build more capability into every vehicle. They couldn't. Simple as that. The parallel evaluations, Becker examining a Jeep in North Africa, American engineers examining a Kübelwagen in Maryland, reached similar conclusions from opposite perspectives. Germans recognized the Jeep as superior but unaffordable. Americans recognized the Kübelwagen as adequate but insufficient. Both assessments were correct. The vehicles weren't just machines. They were physical manifestations of each nation's industrial capacity and strategic situation. Despite, or perhaps because of their recognition of the Jeep's superiority, German forces used captured American vehicles whenever possible. Every Jeep captured became a prized possession, carefully maintained and jealously guarded by whatever unit claimed it. The vehicles were repainted in Feldgrau field gray, the standard Wehrmacht color. Balkenkreuz, the black and white German cross insignia, were painted on hoods and sides. Some units added additional German markings to avoid friendly fire from Luftwaffe pilots who might mistake them for enemy vehicles. But maintenance was challenging. German supply chains carried no spare parts for American vehicles. When something broke, mechanics had to improvise, fabricate or cannibalize parts from other captured Jeeps. The fuel consumption remained problematic. Wehrmacht logistics, already strained by partisan attacks and Allied air superiority, struggled to keep German vehicles running. Adding fuel-hungry American vehicles to the mix was almost impossible. Yet units that captured Jeeps found ways to keep them operational because their capabilities justified the effort. Reconnaissance units particularly valued captured Jeeps. The four-wheel drive, powerful engine, and rugged construction made them excellent for probing enemy positions and escaping quickly if detected. Command units appreciated the standardized radio mounts. Communications were critical, and every captured Jeep came ready to install radios. One infamous operation demonstrated both the value of captured Jeeps and the dangers of imperfect understanding of American practices. December 1944. The Ardennes Offensive, Hitler's last great gamble in the West. As part of the operation, Obersturmbannführer Otto Skorczeny organized Panzer Brigade 150 for Unternehmung Greif, Operation Griffin. The mission: German soldiers disguised in American uniforms, driving captured American vehicles, would infiltrate Allied lines, seize bridges, spread confusion and disrupt communications. Skorczeny assembled the unit with difficulty. Finding German soldiers who spoke English fluently enough to pass as Americans was nearly impossible. Acquiring American uniforms, weapons, and vehicles was challenging. But Skorczeny managed to gather approximately 30 captured Jeeps for the operation. The plan was bold and desperate, but it failed, partly due to a fundamental misunderstanding of American vehicle use. Skorczeny, an experienced commando but not an expert on American military procedures, assumed that since both the Jeep and Kübelwagen seated 4, both would typically carry 4 men. This seemed logical, but American practice differed. U.S. Army Jeeps normally operated with crews of 2 driver and 1 passenger, occasionally 3 if the mission required. 4 men in a Jeep was unusual and suggested something suspicious. Once American MPs were alerted to the infiltration attempt, they began watching for Jeeps carrying 4 men. Any Jeep with 4 occupants was stopped and the occupants questioned. German commandos driving Jeeps with 4-man crews became immediate suspects. Several were caught this way, their cover blown, before they'd accomplished anything. SS Hauptsturmführer Wilhelm Schmidt, Operation Greif participant who survived the war, we thought we understood American procedures. We'd studied their equipment, their tactics, their formations. But small details betrayed us. 4 men in a Jeep seemed normal to us. It was what we would do. Americans knew better. Once they were looking for infiltrators, our 4-man Jeep stood out like signals. We lost men who might have succeeded if we'd understood this detail. Operation Greif failed to achieve any of its objectives. No bridges were captured. Minimal confusion was created. Most infiltration teams were captured or killed within days. Skorczeny's misunderstanding of Jeep crew procedures contributed to the failure. But beyond this tactical debacle, captured Jeeps served German forces well throughout the war. Maintenance remained the primary challenge. Gefreiter Heinrich Müller, mechanic in the 7th Army, maintained captured vehicles in France. We kept 3 American Jeeps running through autumn 1944. Every time something broke, we had to improvise. Broken drive shaft, we fabricated a replacement from parts scavenged from destroyed vehicles. Electrical problems, we rewired using German Cummins that weren't quite compatible. The engines were reliable. That impressed us. They could run on poor quality fuel, take abuse, keep working with minimal maintenance. If we'd had proper parts, those Jeeps would have outlasted our Kübelwagen. Some captured Jeeps remained in German service until the very end of the war. Photos from the Battle of Berlin in May 1945 show German soldiers fleeing in captured American vehicles, including Jeeps. They were driven until they ran out of fuel or were destroyed. The Germans never built anything comparable. The Schwimmwagen Volkswagen Type 166 was Germany's 4-wheel drive amphibious vehicle, built on the Kübelwagen platform. Approximately 15,584 were produced between 1942 and 1944. It was an excellent vehicle, the most produced amphibious car in history. But production was limited. It arrived late in the war, and it couldn't match the Jeep's versatility. By war's end, German soldiers who'd driven both vehicles, their own Kübelwagen and captured Jeeps, almost universally acknowledged the American vehicle's superiority. Not in every aspect. The Kübelwagen remained more fuel-efficient, more maneuverable, faster on roads. But for overall military utility, the Jeep was better. Oberkreiter Klaus Richter, who drove both vehicles extensively. If I could have chosen any vehicle for my reconnaissance platoon, I would have taken Jeeps. More power meant more options. Four-wheel drive meant fewer situations where we'd get stuck. Towing capacity meant we could pull disabled vehicles or weapons. The only reason to prefer our Kübelwagen was fuel. We simply couldn't keep Jeeps running on our fuel allocation. But that was our limitation, not the vehicle's fault. By early 1943, Feldwebel Becker had submitted multiple detailed reports on the captured Jeep. His evaluations were comprehensive, professional, and honest. They circulated through Wehrmacht command, reaching officers who needed to understand what American industrial capacity was producing. Some officers dismissed the reports. Propaganda had told them American equipment was inferior, wasteful, overcomplicated, built by a soft nation that couldn't match German engineering. But officers in the field facing American forces directly knew better. The Jeep wasn't the only impressive American vehicle. The 2.5-ton truck, the Deuce and a Half, was even more important for logistics. The M4 Sherman tank, while inferior to German heavy tanks in direct combat, was reliable and produced in overwhelming numbers. American equipment wasn't necessarily better in every technical specification, but it was good enough, produced in quantities Germany couldn't match, and designed for maintainability by minimally trained personnel. That combination was unbeatable. Becker's final comparative assessment became a Wehrmacht technical document distributed to maintenance units across theaters. It provided detailed comparison between the Willys MB and Kübelwagen Type 82. Jeep advantages. Engine, 60 horsepower versus 22, nearly triple the power. Drivetrain, four-wheel drive versus rear-wheel only, significant advantage in terrain. Towing, can pull heavy loads including light artillery. Kübelwagen limited to minimal loads. Versatility, standardized mounts for radios, weapons, stretchers. Kübelwagen requires variants. Fording, can cross deeper water with proper equipment. Kübelwagen limited. Robustness, heavier construction withstands combat damage better. Standardization, every vehicle identical, simplified logistics and training. Kübelwagen advantages. Weight, 1,450 pounds versus 2,326, over 800 pounds lighter. Fuel economy, nearly double the efficiency, critical for fuel-limited operations. The speed, 80 kilometers per hour versus 72, faster on roads. Maneuverability, lighter and more nimble, better for reconnaissance. Cooling, air-cooled engine eliminates vulnerable radiation. Limited slip differential, innovative technology compensates for rear-wheel drive. Underbody, smooth design allows sledding over terrain where wheels lose traction. Production simplicity, easier to build with limited resources. The philosophical differences were clear. American design philosophy, build the best possible vehicle for the mission, assuming resources are abundant. Maximize capability, standardize everything, design for operation by minimally trained personnel. Accept higher fuel consumption and weight as costs of achieving versatility and power. German design philosophy, build the best possible vehicle within severe resource constraints. Maximize efficiency, minimize weight and fuel consumption, use innovative engineering to overcome limitations. Accept narrower capability as the cost of achieving economy. Both philosophies worked within their contexts. The Jeep was perfect for American needs. A nation with vast petroleum reserves, massive industrial capacity, and a doctrine emphasizing mobility and firepower. The Kübelwagen was excellent for German needs. A nation with limited petroleum, strained industrial capacity, and a doctrine emphasizing efficiency and speed. But the war wasn't being fought in ideal contexts for either side. It was being fought in the real world, where industrial capacity ultimately mattered more than individual vehicle specifications. Germany produced 50,000 Kübelwagen. America produced 640,000 Jeeps, nearly 13 times as many. Even accounting for the Jeep's higher fuel consumption, America could field more vehicles with more capability, supported by supply chains that actually worked. Feldwebel Otto Becker, in his final assessment. We built a vehicle that made sense for Germany. Clever engineering overcame resource limitations. The Kübelwagen is a testament to what skilled designers can achieve when forced to do more with less. But the Americans never had to do more with less. They did more with more. Their Jeep isn't cleverer than our Kübelwagen. It's more powerful, more capable, more versatile, because they could afford to make it so. That's the lesson here. Germany is fighting an industrial war with an economy that cannot match our enemy's production. The Kübelwagen versus Jeep comparison is the entire war in miniature. We built the better vehicle for our situation, but our situation is losing. Senior officers read that assessment with varying reactions. Some were angry. How dare a Feldwebel suggest Germany was losing? Others were thoughtful. Becker had identified a fundamental truth about industrial warfare. By late 1943, evidence of American industrial supremacy was everywhere. The skies filled with American bombers in formations. Germany couldn't intercept. The seas were controlled by American and British navies. Germany couldn't challenge. The Italian front was crumbling under American logistics and firepower. The Eastern Front was collapsing as Soviet forces, equipped with American trucks through Lend-Lease, achieved mobility German forces couldn't match. One Jeep, examined by mechanics in a desert workshop, had revealed all this, not through any single feature or specification, but through what it represented: a nation that could afford to put 60 horsepower and four-wheel drive into every quarter-ton truck. A nation that built 640,000 such vehicles as an afterthought, while simultaneously producing bombers, fighters, tanks, ships, and everything else needed for global war. Germany couldn't compete with that. The Kübelwagen was a good vehicle, but Germany needed 640,000 good vehicles, not 50,000 excellent ones. American production made quantity its own quality. Obergefreiter Paul Wagner, reflecting years after the war, "When we examined that Jeep, we were examining our defeat. Not because the Jeep would personally defeat us, any vehicle can be destroyed, but because if America could build 640,000 Jeeps while fighting a two-front global war, they could build anything in any quantity they needed. We couldn't match that. Our clever engineering, our superior tactics, our better trained soldiers, none of it mattered against that avalanche of production. The Jeep taught us that lesson. Some of us learned it. Most learned it too late. The Willys MB Jeep and Volkswagen Type 82 Kübelwagen both ended production in 1945, but their legacies extended far beyond the war. The Jeep's influence, 640,000 MB and GPW models served in every theater of World War II. They carried American, British, Canadian, Australian, Free French, Polish, and Soviet soldiers. Through Lend-Lease, thousands reached Allied armies worldwide. After the war, surplus Jeeps flooded civilian markets. Farmers bought them for field work. Hunters used them for backcountry access. Construction companies utilized them as utility vehicles. In 1945, Willys introduced the civilian Jeep, the CJ2A. It featured larger headlights, more comfortable seats, and a tailgate stamped with Willys branding. Priced at $1,090, it became hugely popular. Farmers discovered the Jeep could pull plows, power water pumps via power takeoff, haul supplies, and transport families to town, all with one vehicle. The station wagon variant, introduced in July 1946, seated 7 and cost $1,495. It became the forerunner of the modern SUV. The Jeep brand continued evolving through decades. Kaiser bought Willys in 1953. American Motors acquired Kaiser Jeep in 1970. Chrysler bought AMC in 1987 primarily to acquire the Jeep brand. Fiat Chrysler and later Stellantis continued the lineage. Today's Jeep Wrangler traces direct lineage to the World War II MB, flattened windshield, removable doors, 7-slot grille inherited from Ford's stamped design. The Philippines developed jeepneys, elongated vehicles built from surplus Jeeps left after the war, serving as colorful public transportation. The Jeep's influence extended beyond vehicles. Jeep became a generic term for any small off-road vehicle. Land Rover, introduced in 1948, was directly inspired by Jeeps British forces had used during the war. The Toyota Land Cruiser, Nissan Patrol, and virtually every four-wheel drive utility vehicle designed since 1945 owes debt to the MB's pioneering design. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander. The Jeep, the Dakota, and the landing craft were the three tools that won the war. Ernie Pyle had called it as faithful as a dog, as strong as a mule, and as agile as a goat. General George C. Marshall, U.S. Army Chief of Staff, declared it America's greatest contribution to modern warfare. Those assessments, made during and immediately after the war, proved accurate. The Jeep changed how armies thought about mobility. The Kübelwagen's influence. 50,435 Type 82 vehicles served Germany throughout the war. An additional 15,584 Schwimmwagen amphibious variants were built. The Schwimmwagen became the most produced amphibious car in history, a record that still stands. After the war, captured Kübelwagen were used by various armies. The vehicle's reputation for reliability and clever engineering survived despite Germany's defeat. Many American GIs brought home positive memories of captured Kübelwagen. This helped Volkswagen Beetles gain acceptance in the American market during the 1950s. Veterans who'd driven Kübelwagen remembered them as economical, reliable, and well-engineered. When VW began exporting Beetles to America, this residual respect helped the brand establish a foothold. By the 1960s, Beetles were common on American roads. Former enemies' vehicles accepted because veterans respected German engineering. The Kübelwagen had no direct successor. Volkswagen focused on civilian vehicles after the war, but the Type 181, the Thing or Trekker produced from 1968 to 1983, was a spiritual successor. It used Beetle mechanicals in a simple body that echoed the Kübelwagen's utilitarian design. Modern military vehicles benefit from both designs' innovations. The Kübelwagen's limited slip differential became standard on four-wheel drive vehicles. The Jeep's standardized adaptability influenced military vehicle design worldwide. Both vehicles transcended their military origins to become cultural icons. The Jeep symbolizes American can-do attitude, versatile, powerful, able to handle any challenge. Jeep advertisements still evoke wartime imagery, trading on the vehicle's heroic history. The Kübelwagen, though less famous internationally, represents clever German engineering, doing more with less through innovation rather than brute force. Collectors restore both vehicles meticulously. Original MB Jeeps, in good condition, command premium prices $20,000 to $50,000 depending on condition and provenance. Restored Kübelwagen are rarer and often more expensive, $30,000 to $70,000. The Schwimmwagen, rarest of all, can exceed $100,000. Reenactors at World War II commemorations drive both vehicles, recreating historic scenes. Museums display them alongside tanks and aircraft. The vehicles remind new generations what the war looked like at ground level, not through tanks or aircraft, but through the simple trucks that carried soldiers, supplies, and communications. Veterans who served with both vehicles are nearly gone now. The last World War II veterans are in their 90s or older. Soon, no living person will remember driving these vehicles in combat, but the vehicles themselves survive in museums, private collections, and continued production. The Jeep brand thrives in the 21st century. The Kübelwagen's engineering influenced generations of Volkswagen products. Private First Class Donald Wright, who drove both vehicles during the European campaign, reflecting in 2008 at age 84. The Jeep was our workhorse, carried everything, went everywhere, never quit. The Kübelwagen we captured was fun to drive. Light, quick, economical, both were good vehicles. But the Jeep won the war. Not because it was better in every way. It wasn't. Because America could build 640,000 of them while Germany built 50,000 Kübelwagen. That's what mattered. Industrial capacity. Production. America had it. Germany didn't. Everything else was details. That assessment from someone who experienced both vehicles in combat captured the essential truth. Individual technical merits mattered less than industrial reality. Germany built an excellent vehicle within its constraints. America built a slightly less efficient but far more capable vehicle without constraints. In total war, abundance beats efficiency. Mass production beats clever engineering. 640,000 versus 50,000. That ratio told the war's story more clearly than any battle report. When Feldwebel Otto Becker first examined that captured Jeep in the Libyan desert in November 1942, he recognized immediately what it represented. Not just a vehicle, a statement of industrial confidence. A nation that could afford to put 60 horsepower, four-wheel drive, and standardized adaptability into every quarter-ton truck was a nation Germany couldn't defeat through superior tactics or better training alone. His reports stated this clearly. Some officers listened. Most didn't, or couldn't accept the implications. By 1945, the evidence was undeniable. German forces used captured American equipment whenever possible, not because German equipment was inferior, but because American equipment was available in quantities that made individual quality less important. The Kübelwagen was, pound for pound, arguably a more impressive engineering achievement than the Jeep. Doing more with less resources requires more ingenuity than doing more with abundant resources. But wars aren't won by the most ingenious engineering. They're won by the side that can field enough good enough equipment to overwhelm the enemy. America could. Germany couldn't. The Jeep versus Kübelwagen comparison encapsulated that reality. Wehrmacht mechanics who drove captured Jeeps admitted something their propaganda never would. We never had vehicles like this. Not because German engineers couldn't design them, but because German industry couldn't produce them in war-winning numbers. That admission, quiet and uncomfortable, acknowledged the truth about industrial warfare. In total war, production capacity matters more than individual excellence. America understood this instinctively, designing for mass production from the beginning. Germany understood it too late, building quality when quantity was required. The Jeep and Kübelwagen, 60 horsepower against 22, 640,000, against 50,000, four-wheel drive against clever compensation, told the entire story of industrial warfare in miniature. One vehicle represented abundance. The other represented ingenuity under constraint. Both were remarkable achievements. But only one philosophy could win modern industrial war. Feldwebel Otto Becker, final entry in his personal diary, May 1945. We lost this war the moment we couldn't match their production. All our tactical brilliance, all our engineering cleverness, all our soldiers' courage. It wasn't enough. They simply built more of everything than we could destroy. The Jeep taught me that lesson in 1942. I tried to tell Berlin. Nobody listened. Now Germany is rebel, and American Jeeps patrol our streets. We built the Kübelwagen. They built 640,000 Jeeps. That was the war.